There we go. There we go.
All right, I will bring the May 16th, 2023 Board of Education meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Kate Thomas,
Here.
Troy Carr,
Here.
Deb Baker,
Here.
Jim Hansen,
Here.
Clay Colom is absent with notice, Jamie Clapham, and Michael Kirkland.
Here.
Someone's mic is on their computer. Just check. Okay, thank you. All right, Dale Barcher is here tonight to do the invocation, please. Thank you.
Pray. Heavenly Father, we come today to thank you for this day of life, asking you for your guidance, wisdom, and support as we begin this meeting. Help us engage in meaningful discussion, allow this school board to grow closer as a group and nurture the bonds of unity between them and our community. Lord, they are meeting today to conduct business, guide their hearts and their minds with a spirit of fairness, right thought, and speech. The fact that we are almost at the close of another school year says that you are a faithful God, and we gain our strength in that truth. Our school board has made it through, and we give thanks. Thank you for being our source of protection as we pray for the physical, mental, and emotional, spiritual health of our schools, administration, teachers, support staff, parents, grandparents, guardians, and students, one and all. And so tonight we pray all this and so much more in the name of the one who is the same yesterday, today, and forever, Christ our Lord. Amen.
Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, I need a motion for the approval of the proposed agenda.
I make a motion. Second.
Deb and Jamie, I need a roll call on that.
Kate,
Yes.
Troy,
Yes.
Deb,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Jamie,
Yes.
Michael.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
All right, on to the student representative reports, my favorite part. We'll start with Kevin Big Crow from Rapid City High School.
Hello, board and everyone who showed up tonight. Thank you for giving me your time and just showing up today. I really appreciate it as we students wrap up our last meeting today. And I'll jump right in as always. I'll begin with a quick reminder for the Feeding South Dakota School Food Pantry at Rapid City High School. On the third Thursday of each month, which is this Thursday, the 18th, the food pantry at Rapid City High School is opened after school to any family with students in the district. Thank you to the district community relations manager for getting the word out district-wide about this opportunity. Continuing on, at the end of each quarter, Rapid City High School holds an all-school assembly. On May 26th, we'll have an assembly scheduled to allow for all learners and staff to gather in the historic theater. During the assembly, we'll celebrate learners that have exhibited the school-wide expectations of being respectful, being present, and being courageous. Also at this assembly, the Rushmore Rotary Club will present the second semester Students of Distinction Awards. And as you are all aware, this time of year is packed with end of the year celebrations. In addition to our new tradition of an all-school assembly, there will be a few other celebrations in the next 2 weeks. The celebrations begin with the annual grad walk this Friday. Seniors from Rapid City High School will join the seniors from Central High School to spread the joy of graduation to the elementary students. Turning our attention to next week, on behalf of all the graduating seniors at Rapid City High School, I'd like to invite the Board of Education and general public to 3 distinct celebrations. On May 24th, the senior honoring and feather tying ceremony will take place at the Central High School starting at 5:30 p.m. On Friday, May 26th at 7 p.m., Rapid City High School will hold its graduation ceremony in our historic theater. And on May 30th, the GED completion ceremony will take place at Rapid City High School starting at 6 p.m. We welcome everyone to attend and celebrate with us. And to wrap it up, thank you. As this is our last meeting of the year with student representatives, I would like to take a moment to express my gratitude. It has been an honor to represent my school as a student representative on the board. Thank you for welcoming me, encouraging me, and listening to my reports. At the center of everything the school district does for learners like me, working hard to reach graduation day. To this entire school district, teachers, paraprofessionals, secretaries, nutrition services, custodians, classmates, administration, school board, and all the behind the scenes offices, thank you for the support as me and my fellow classmates discover our paths. In closing, I'd like to remind you of our school-wide expectations, Rapid City High School. Be respectful, be present, and be courageous. Respectfully submitted, Kevin Big Crow.
Thank you. All right, Megan Jew from Stevens High School.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. I was unaware that I was supposed to be prepared. So I guess you could say senioritis is finally hitting. But essentially, on the sports side of our school, we still have boys tennis going on, girls golf, and track and boys baseball. So go support their events. And then academically, we just finished 2 weeks of AP exams. So big congratulations to all of our AP students. And then on Tuesday of last week was the final band concert. And yesterday we had senior signing for all of our fine arts students. And then this Thursday, we will have the final orchestra concert, which my friend and I are playing a duet in. So please go watch. And so with that, seniors are really looking forward to graduate, myself being one of them. Tonight we have honors convocation. And I just like to thank everyone for this wonderful experience. It's been a pleasure to be involved with our school community. And I look forward to graduating next weekend.
Thank you. All right, Laura Jensen from Central High School.
Hello, board and all that are here today. I'm Laura Jensen, your student rep from Central. It appears there's only a week left for our seniors this year. There are a lot of activities for seniors this last week, including a senior breakfast, a elementary school grad walk, and a graduation. that's the big one. Seniors are getting ready to say farewell to their classes and hello to their future. This week, there will be a grad walk additionally through Central's halls to show off the seniors one last time before graduation. The seniors will be led by our CHS drumline. Also this week, other students are preparing for their next year's classes, collecting summer assignments and information from their teachers. Finals are just around the corner and students and teachers alike are working to prepare for it. Even though it's no longer Teacher Appreciation Week, make sure to give thanks to the educators that are in your life if you can. The PE department is celebrating National PE Week, and to celebrate today, they grilled hot dogs and hamburgers for the students to purchase. And today was our final orchestra concert where is later today, where Mr. Knowles is retiring after this year. So it's his final concert. So if you leave early, maybe you can make it, but yeah, so it's really exciting. As a senior myself, it's hard to believe we're almost done. With our high school career, it's been a long and exciting school year at Central, and I couldn't imagine it any other way. I am very thankful to have gotten to serve on this board and meet so many wonderful people. I would like to thank the board and Principal Seals for this opportunity. Thank you.
All right, on to sharing the success, which is you all students representing your different schools. Go ahead, Mrs. Swaggart.
Thank you, President Thomas. I know you have said multiple times throughout this year that this is your favorite part. I have enjoyed it as well. These are phenomenal representatives of our 3 buildings. My daughter was a student rep once, so I know how much time and effort to commit to coming twice a month to a meeting and then wondering when it's okay to leave. So that always happened. But I will tell you that I know that she has taken that forward in her life and this ability to speak in front of people, understand the way boards work, a little learning about politics and action, I would say. So I'm from the bottom of my heart, congratulations, Megan and Laura. You are this close to being done and you have been a joy to listen to. I hope your honors convocation and your last concerts go amazing. Kevin, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure I'm just going to tell Ms. Roberts that if you're willing, you have to do this again next year because it has been a true treat to get to know you and listen. And I would like to do it again next year. If I have to stay, I guess you do too. That's just part of the deal. So wonderful student reps. We have some gifts for you. They assured me I would know who gets which bag.
Great.
So students, we have signed a card for you. There's a gift in the bag. But most exciting, there is a check. There is a check for our thanks for the effort that you put in. That is donations and Miss Baker, she works really hard to get donations for that. And then the district picks up the rest. But a small token, by no means is it cover everything that you have done as students of Rapid City area schools. And Megan and Laura, we wish you the best. Have you decided for sure where you're going? Megan, I know you had lots of offers. Where did you end up? MIT. There was a Harvard conversation earlier this year. I walked by and she's talking about waiting to hear from Harvard, which I know she was accepted to. And now she's going to MIT. That is incredible. And Laura? School of Mines. And I wish more kids went to the School of Mines as it is such an outstanding college right here in the Black Hills. So I appreciate that. Kevin, next year. Okay, we'll have that conversation. I think we need a picture.
Sure. Sometimes. Thank you.
President Thomas, thanks for letting us go first so that they could head out to their events tonight.
No problem. All right, we are on to persons wishing to address the board. Issues affecting individual or particular schools should be addressed at the school building. Speakers should focus on their main points and not be repetitive. Personal matters or complaints directly or indirectly identifying an employee shall not be discussed. And to maintain a civil dialogue, threats and intimidation are not allowed. First speaker, David Neeham. And we each have 5 minutes.
Hey, first, I want to thank all you guys for what you do. I consider myself more like a journalist because I can't make a meeting. We're all trying to, accomplish the same thing. We all want a better community, a better state, better nation. So some people might not agree with me. I pick controversial subjects because they need to be talked about. A lot of people have been silenced, so I'm not going to be silenced because I got kids and grandkids and things are too important. So, thank you very much for what you do. 10 years ago, we all agreed that there were only 2 genders, that drag shows were adult-only entertainment, and that aborting a full-term baby was unthinkable. We also agreed that parents had a right to raise their children according to their religious or secular beliefs. Now it seems that only secular beliefs are considered valid in many parts of the country. That our nation was built on Judeo-Christian principles is not debatable. There are thousands of quotes from political leaders as to the biblical foundations of our nation. In 1950, Democrat President Truman said, "The fundamental basis of this nation's laws was given to Moses on the mountain. The fundamental basis of our Bill of Rights comes from the teachings we get from the Bible." We don't emphasize that enough. If we don't have the proper fundamental moral background, we will finally end up with a totalitarian government, which does not believe in right for anybody except the state, he said. First, secularists used the letter from Thomas Jefferson to push God out of government. Then they set their sights on pushing God out of society. And now we see contempt for the beliefs of people of faith. Aside from contempt, how can you explain those who want to teach that there are over 100 genders to the children of parents who believe otherwise? In critical theory, social emotional learning and diversity, equity, and inclusion as structured shows contempt for those that believe that we are all created in the image of God, and that if we judge people, we should judge based on the content of their character and not by gender, race, or religion. The far left have become a moral minority whose morality changes daily, and they have weaponized government, corporations, media, and many educators to attack those whose morality does not bend to their will. We would be foolish to believe that the anti-God, anti-family, and anti-patriot ideologies that we see in blue states will not spread if unchallenged. I understand South Dakota is a little bit different, but I think we need to keep our guard up. Not one Democrat in Congress voted for the Parents' Bill of Rights. Not one Democrat in Congress voted for the Protect Women in Sports bill. And not one Democrat in Congress voted on a Born Alive bill that would protect victims of botched abortions. Many Republicans have also lost their moral compass and worked together with Democrats, pandering to the global Marxist elites. I voted against Thune and Johnson for the first time in the last election because they are either part of the problem or ineffective deterrents. In one of his radio addresses, Democrat President Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, No greater thing could come to our land today than a revival of the spirit of religion, a revival that would sweep through the homes of the nation and stir the hearts of men and women of all faiths to a reassertion of their belief in God and their dedication to his will for themselves and for their world. I doubt if there's any problem, social, political, or economic, that would not melt away before the fire of such a spiritual awakening. Now, that is a Democrat I can agree with. So, but you know, those type of Democrats no longer exist in the political realm in our nation. At least not much on the national level. On the plus side, there seems to be more and more Democrat politicians on the state level waking up to reality and becoming independents or Republicans. The last stage of a communist revolution is to demoralize the people.
I'm sorry, that is
Oh.
time.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you very much. Appreciate it. Thanks for your time. Might be moving, so you might not have to hear from me anymore.
Sarah Gross.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Gross, and I'm a teacher, parent, and advocate for my profession and for my kids and their schools. Today, I would like to discuss numerous issues. It started out as 3. But first, I was excited to hear that the facilities may be a part of the strategic plan moving forward. I was curious if the facilities committee could give updates regularly, maybe at the end of the meeting. I know that happened lately. For me, working in a building that is 73 years old, it's very, very, very relevant. A quick reality of just in the last 2 weeks, my toilet, I have a toilet in my little space, and when it gets very windy, it dries out. And so they called the plumber. He was able to fix it, but it's something that an old building we have more and more issues with. I'm still really, upset isn't the right word because my building needs a new roof. But putting $900,000 into a building that I feel like should be pushed down, it seems like we're putting good money after bad because we haven't been able to make choices. So I would really appreciate an update on the facilities as regularly as possible. Number 2, I've been listening closely to the public speakers about banning certain books. I have kids. I'm not crazy. I recognize that many of us have the same goal to help children and save them from harm. However, I would like to question publicly some of your strategy. By reading passages, you are fueling a culture war that does not help the majority of students. In fact, I can say with certainty that it hurts more than helps by pushing out good educators that do not wish to be involved in the politics. There is a policy. If you do not like the policy, like if you do the policy, you will be doing actually real good work that will help students. Number 3 on my list is the negotiations. Thank you so much for all of you who attended negotiations and the board members and Mr. Sassy. I know that those were long, tedious conversations, and I really appreciate your time. I don't believe I personally in my 12 or 13 years in the district have received a bump of this magnitude. Number 4 is health aides. I know I'm a bit late on this one and perhaps too late, but I know there are a few students whose families have been really impacted by the loss of health aides. I'm curious if there are other funding sources that can be looked into for the future because I feel like it's a really valuable thing. Number 5, I know I love the board reps so much, and I remember back a couple of years ago, and I was curious if there's a board rep policy. I know that they was going to be revised, and I've been watching frequently, and I just didn't know if it had come out yet. And then at 5:30, I know that I busted tail to get here. I'm going to go to a baseball game after this. But I know that blue forms have been turned in after 5:30. And since I made such an effort to get here, I would request that they are pulled at 5:30. And any that came in tonight, I think it's reasonable that they don't get to speak. And then finally, we have our school board elections. Last night I got to meet the Area 5 candidate. And I think I encourage everyone to There's two, of course, and there's 4 and 4. But I really encourage everyone, especially my peers, to get involved and talk to the people to find out who you think is really best and will be best on our board. And so I really appreciate your time on this beautiful evening. I know you're missing it just as we all are. So thank you and have a good night.
Thank you. Florence Thompson.
Good evening, board. I'd like to read the end of Dave's speech because he didn't have enough time and I don't have a lot to say, so I'll just read his last couple of paragraphs here, or the last paragraph. The last stage of a communist revolution is to demoralize the people, to cause them to turn aside from what is good or true or morally right, to weaken the morale of the people, to discourage them so that they quit. I pray that I will never quit, no matter the price I have to pay. We are here in this current national unraveling because too many good people have been bullied into silence. I pray that good men and women would take courage, stand up for truth, and push back the darkness that has gripped our nation. Thank you. And that was from Dave. I didn't prepare a lot tonight. The sun time just threw me a curve. I looked at the clock and I couldn't believe what time it was. I thought I had lots of time left to get to town. So anyway, I'd like to talk a little bit about just how we got where we are in education in this country. As you know, way back in the day, there have been many different education programs from Congress, but Common Core was the final nail in the coffin, really. And that was passed, and it was passed through the Obama administration. And it came in, they facilitated it. And so all the teachers thought that they wrote Common Core themselves, even though each state was the same as each other state. So the teachers were finessed to the point where they thought that they really had written these. It's interesting that all the states turned out the same. We now have the SBAC test, okay, I'm locking on the words, but anyway, the SBAC test. And it is Common Core compliant test. And we must have a Common Core compliant test. It is required. Now, the Every Child Succeeds Act, Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA law, was then passed by Congress, both houses, completely bipartisan, everybody voted for it. And that put, well, not everybody, I guess there might have been a few that didn't, but that all of our delegation did from South Dakota. That put Common Core into statute. So that put what I consider and what many people consider to be an unconstitutional education department. It put the federal government in charge of education. Education is not in the Constitution. It is not mentioned as a function of the federal government. So all of those things that were not mentioned for the federal government were to be the priority of the states and of the people. And so the Federal Department of Education is really unconstitutional, and for us to have a federal law of education that governs us is unconstitutional. So here we are, we've got a centrally controlled education system, and they put their dictates down and we follow them. And it's all enforced by the SBAC test because the schools will teach to the test. And that dictates the materials too, because everybody wants the compliant materials so that they can do well on the test. So 95% of students across the country and in each state are required to take that Common Core compliant test. Now, our state will say, we don't have Common Core. We have South Dakota standards. We wrote them ourselves. That's just a
That's
myth.
time, Florence. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we are on to board response for open forum topics. Does anybody have one? No, this is just the response to those comments just now. And then I'll do that. But thank you for reminding me of that. Mrs. Clapham.
Just really brief, and I would say it's timely with the elections coming up, and just I would say this, that school board elections are nonpartisan for a reason. The school board room is not where politics belong. It's not where religion belongs. The board is nonpartisan, and our job is to make every decision for what is right and best for our students, our staff, and our community. And I believe everybody at this table is dedicated to doing that work and doing that work every single day. A lot of times when we're not at this table, and it has nothing to do with any letter by our name or any registration or any of that. And I said, I do think we are all committed to doing what is best in its purest form, what is best for this community.
Bishop Carr.
I wanted to address the facilities report. Facilities, a lot of times when people talk about.
Oh, your mic. Sorry.
A lot of times when people talk about facilities, they talk about new buildings, but in being on the facilities committee, facilities report is so vast. You talk about improvements, you talk about grass and windows, and so I don't know if you'd be able to get a comprehensive facilities, true facilities of the district report. I think it would be easier if you have a specific question about a particular building, about a new building, whatever, that would be more helpful besides just getting a comprehensive facilities report. I do know that new facilities is on the board's radar. It is going to be part of our strategic plan, and so I know that I can give you that at least.
Mr. Berkland.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to you all for bringing things to our attention. That's one of the things I appreciate about public forum is sometimes there's things that I hadn't thought about, like the board rep policy, for example. I just wanted to make a note that we are a smarter balanced state, but only 17 states are part of the SBAC. So we are one of 17, but
yes,
I don't disagree there. I'm just, for the record, there are 17 states that are smarter balanced states.
Okay. All right. I don't see any others, so I will just comment on a couple things. The negotiations. I know that tedious was mentioned that they may have been. I want to make sure that nobody, at least I was not thinking that they were tedious. They were really important and they are long. However, I think it establishes a really good relationship. And we don't like to say on both sides, we're all a team when we're in these negotiations, and we learn a lot about each other and where people are at in their different jobs. So it was long, but it was definitely important and respectful. So also the representatives, we took that out as a policy because it's more, it belongs more in the student handbook. Your principal, there's an application, it goes on within each book, and that's too much, I guess, as we say, upstairs business. Policy is more upstairs, where that needs to be within each building, and more of a student handbook item. And then lastly, I am going to allow for more comments or questions on the public hearing for the ESSER funds, because by law we need to, and I'm not sure that the public understands that they're allowed to have that. So if there is anybody else that does want to comment on the next item, which is the public hearing for ARP, what does that stand for?
American Rescue Plan.
Okay, and that is the topic of the ESSER funds, and that only that only can be the topic of your questions or discussion. And I do have two so far. If there's anybody else, ask Shirley for that card or the paper, the form.
President Thomas.
Yes, go ahead.
Can I go back one?
Yes.
I just want to make sure that everybody is clear about our agenda. Item 7 is persons wishing to address the board. That is an opportunity for people to speak to us. Item 8 is the board response to the open forum, which is our opportunity to speak to them. And so it's really inappropriate for there to be comments to any board member about what they've said. So number 8 is your direction. I'm just saying, number 8, number 7 is your comments to us. Number 8 is our comments to you. And then there's no discussion after that. Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop Carr. All right, so I do need a motion and a second to go into the public hearing.
So moved.
Michael and Deb. And we need a roll call.
I'm sorry, President Thomas,
That's
I missed
okay.
that previous agenda item. Kate Thomas,
Yes.
Troy Carr,
Yes.
Deb Baker,
Yes.
Jim Hansen,
Yes.
Jamie Clapham,
Yes.
and Michael Berkelin.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
All right, and our first commenter or questioner is Sarah Gross.
Oh, thank you again. I won't introduce myself. I have followed I have been in the district long enough and watched the come and go. And I know that there's an ESSER 1 that shut down from the Title I presentation last Tuesday, which was phenomenal. I learned a tremendous amount and I would recommend anyone. I know that can answer parts of my question, but I was curious about a breakdown of where those funds went. In Rapid City, I feel that we've had a chronic underfunding of our schools and in South Dakota for a long time. And so we pushed a lot of money into ESSER and I don't know if that's ESSER 1, ESSER 2, or ESSER 3. And so I don't know if it's possible, like the facilities committee, it's huge. And I was wondering about some type of handout or breakdown specifically on the ESSER funds, just because I've tried to track and it's complex as things have changed and dynamics have changed and the requirements are strict. And so that was my only comment, is that I was hoping for like a 1-pager, and I think that would be an oversimplification, maybe with a lot of asterisks and stars. But that was my only comment. So thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. All right, and Jennifer Hasvold.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak. I'm Jennifer Hasvold. I have 3 children, 2 in public schools, and my third was at the Y, and that 5:30 meeting time snuck up on me, so I wasn't planning on bringing her. Thanks everyone for your patience. I want to just echo the gratitude that's been expressed for all the work this board does. I just really value that there's a space in our community where diverse perspectives and opinions can be heard and valued and respected. And it's clear that you all work very hard to create that. So thank you. With respect to the ESSER funds, I know next to nothing about school funding and staffing. And once again, I'm very grateful that there are people in our community who are dedicating their time and energy to exploring these important topics. But I did want to share my perspective as a parent of a child with special needs. My son, Sam, is 7 years old. He has cerebral palsy and he's in 3rd grade. He also has epilepsy and he has significant medical needs. If we didn't have the excellent care that he receives at Meadowbrook, we laugh because every year we get the letter that he's missed too much school and he can't progress to the next grade, which is like, he'll progress. But he already misses a fair amount of school because of his medical needs. And if we didn't have the level of care that he currently receives at his elementary school, he would miss considerably more. It has been so important for us that Sam be able to attend public school and be a part of a community. I believe it's important for other students as well to build relationships with students like Sam who are different from them. And I don't know the details of the ESSER funds. I do have a sense that it would impact the amount of assistance that students like my son Sam would be able to receive in our schools. And I just wanted to share my perspective that is, somewhat unique and probably not reflective of the typical parent experience. So thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, and my husband and I are both physicians. And so our child being able to be in public schools really makes a big difference in terms of our ability to care for our communities as well. Thanks.
Thank you. We don't have a comment to a spot for response, but, and I'm not putting you too much on the whatever, on the fly here, but because I know you know your stuff. So just a quick comment maybe about the requirements. How big does that report look back to the ESSER fund? And then a quick maybe indication that special education funds, which I'm assuming her child would, or children of that nature would fall under, is different, how it is different from the ESSER funds.
Sure.
So go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, President Thomas. I certainly over the last several years, that's been a bit of a wild ride in terms of the ESSER funding. I think just a very, very brief background for everybody. So essentially that came in three different parts. And the first part, ESSER 1, that we now refer to it as, was actually originally called CARES. And so the district got an initial allotment through CARES or ESSER 1. And at that point in time, the parameters for that money were a little more open than we saw in later financial packages like ESSER 2 and ESSER 3. So the major piece of guidance was really around preparing your school to respond to COVID or any type of a epidemic type of situation. And so and deal with obviously learning loss, PPE for employees, a lot of those types of things, keeping your buildings operational and open to the best of your ability. Obviously that went a different direction as well. But that initial CARES money was really aimed towards, for example, computer purchases so that we could go one-to-one and have the ability to have distance learning and those things. Different licenses for different learning modules, which I am not the expert to talk about, but Canvas, Google Drive, some of those different things, credit recovery staff, obviously PPE supplies, summer credit recovery programs, some transitional support. So that was really where ESSER 1 was aimed. Then when ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, which came out very close proximity to each other in terms of dates, started to be discussed. And we started to understand that those were going to be much larger awards than CARES, was really when the conversation opened up around the idea of what would it look like if we were to take that money and pledge it towards a facility. And so ESSER 2 came out first. That was about $18 million. That had a specific set aside requirement for what was called learning loss. And that had very, very specific parameters around what it could and couldn't be used for. ESSER 3 had none of those same requirements. Obviously, there were a lot of parameters, but we began having conversations with the board, obviously internally amongst the administration, and then ultimately with state and federal representatives from the Department of Education, and talked about the idea of, could we use this to build a facility? And, you know, initially that had its own windy path. We thought that potentially we could build an elementary school and most of a middle school with that pot of money. We also explored the idea of doing a large scale HVAC renovation throughout the district. As we took South Middle School out to bid first, given that was the highest rated building in terms of need and priority. That bid came in way over where we thought it was going to. It became immediately, we became immediately aware that there was no way that we were going to pull that off. We actually pulled back to just the South Middle project. And then of course the district ultimately had to fund or will fund about $20 million of that project through its own resources. So really the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 pots are almost entirely dedicated to the South Middle School project. I think we certainly could have a broad recap of what that money was used for in the major buckets that went into. If you'd like, 60 or 80 pages of actual account breakdown. I can get you that too if you need some light reading some evening. And then, yeah, in terms of the health assistant portion of that, obviously, as that was being discussed, that was another portion of the learning loss set aside of ESSER two. We were well aware that those funds were going to expire, and those folks were being brought in specifically for the purpose of COVID response and what the district was responding to at that time. Yeah, I think obviously there are situations out in the district, and Superintendent Swigert is probably better suited to discuss that than me. But obviously there are situations with students with special needs and in their IEP qualifying for specific services that the district would then go out and fund and bring on board. So just some brief history, but certainly if there are any other questions, I'm happy to answer how I can.
No, thank you. I think that was perfect. Any other questions can also email if there are any on this topic specifically, if the public ends up seeing this and having their own questions. Okay, so on to conflict of interest. No waivers have been turned in. To close it, okay. I need a motion and a second to close the public hearing.
So moved. Sorry.
Jamie and Deb? Kate? Yes.
Troy,
Yeah.
Deb,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Jamie,
Yes.
and Michael.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 6-0.
Okay, on to a conflict of interest, number 10, no waivers have been turned in, so we are on to the approval of the proposed consent agenda. I need a motion.
Can I pull L?
I will
first?
ask,
Oh,
hold on.
okay. I thought that usually came before the motion. Sorry.
Nope, Deb and
Me, sure.
Michael, okay. Anyone want anything pulled?
Yes, I would like to pull L, please.
Delta, we got some Delta.
Nope.
Delta, Juliet, and Juliet. And where are they?
Double A.
L.
So it's D, L, J, A, and I would like to pull C, C. All right, with those pulled, we have we need a roll call. We have a motion and a second for approval.
Kate,
Yes.
Troy,
Yes.
Deb,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Jamie,
Yes.
Michael.
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0.
All right, we are on to D. I need a motion and a second. Troy, Deb, discussion.
Right, I pulled it because under the, had everything together.
It's hard.
All
with these
right,
big pictures.
under the chief financial and operations officer, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that we talked about that position being the business manager, and I'm okay if in parentheses, it says business manager. And in our discussions, it would not necessarily be for our explanation, but for the public at large and people that understand what a business manager means. Is that my correct understanding that should say?
Bishop Carr, thank you. The state does require the district business manager to sign many documents.
Okay.
So having that subtitle is just clarification for the public to know who we would have sign off on that. Coy always signs off on that, right? So, but that's
For the what you're saying, for the
So it's-
public,
So it should say, and even if it said in parentheses, again, this is not for us, it's for people who are wondering what our organizational structure is. And most people, my understanding, will be looking at this chart for the business manager, and they won't see one because we've identified it as something else. So I'm just saying for clarity,
For clarity, yes,
shouldn't
sir.
it have those words?
Agreed.
Okay.
Good catch.
My second thing, and it's just kind of cosmetic, the community relations manager where that bubble is just kind of in an odd place. And I believe it would have the same meaning if it was just off to the side, right under the superintendent CEO. I think that makes, that'd be more aesthetically. And my other comment is just for aesthetics, that instead of the arrows that we use horizontal and vertical lines under directors and under support services, that would make the whole thing consistent with all the other horizontal and vertical lines instead of arrows. And I think that's it. Thank you.
There was some discussion, if I could.
Hold on one second. Mr. Hanson.
For clarification, Mr. Carr, you want the community relations under the CEO, the superintendent? So it looks good on paper?
Now it's just off to the side, kind of in a weird bubble all by itself. So
Yeah, but it needs to be there because if you put it directly underneath, then that person now is the boss of the directors. So you have to move it off to the side so that it flows in the org chart.
Yeah. I think you're right.
okay, I was wondering about that. Well, okay, and not to argue over a line, but I'm just saying, and maybe even asking for clarification, is it would be to the, she wouldn't be in that direct line from the superintendent to the directors. She would be off to the side. If the line went under her to the directors, then it would look like that she was over the directors. But if it's to the side, then it just means that she's under the superintendent CEO is my understanding. If I'm wrong about that, then I'm good with, well, I'm not good with leaving it where it is because it just looks weird, but putting it somewhere else where it looks more aesthetically.
President Thomas?
Yes, please.
I agree with Bishop Carr and his last clarifications. I understand now. And that does make better sense what he just said.
Okay. Mrs. Clapham.
Oh, I think I'm agreeing with Jim. So you're saying like below but to the side. So it obviously would be the same size and it wouldn't go directly down. It's
Just up to the off branch of that. I don't know if that's. I tried to go.
It's backwards too.
I think they got it. Does that make sense? Okay, thank you so very much. Thank you so very much.
Would it be just kind of like the assistant superintendent, but on the other side?
Yeah, exactly.
Any other comments?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
President Thomas. There was some discussion about payroll manager. So if I could share my screen. Bobby, if I could share my screen. Thank you. Host is disabled screen sharing. I can describe it if I can't share. Thank you. There has been some discussion about payroll manager internally and how that is equally answering to the financial office as well as HR. So I did ask Shirley to make an adjustment. So we moved financial services manager over to the left. and then payroll manager to the bottom under HR and put a dotted line. So there is that connection that I think was being requested. Payroll manager has to work with HR in the sense that it is leave, benefits, FMLA, calendars, vacation, those types of things, substitutes. On the other hand, it is a very huge part of our budget. And we do want some financial management of that. We've had some internal conversations, so is this something you're comfortable with, Coy?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately it'd be good and my belief is that this is a continuing conversation, obviously, in terms of what the layout of the organization looks like. I don't think we're trying to achieve the absolute final state of this evening. Yeah, I think there are certainly areas, primarily the payroll side being one that has obviously very heavy connections to sort of both sides of the organization. And so we had discussed that a bit and talked about the idea of where does that land. I think there are aspects of that certainly that I mean, when you think about the idea that well over $100 million of the district's budget is dedicated to payroll, that there are aspects of the financial side of things that could support that function really well. Things like internal control, checks and balances, segregation of duties, that my side and the business side is really responsible for and structures and understands. Obviously, there has to be coordination with human resources, as Superintendent Swiger said, in terms of looking at the benefit side and some of those things. So yeah, I think it's an ongoing discussion. I think it's something we continue to explore and discuss. And yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
I think the only other question that would be necessary is who does the payroll manager's evaluation? And would it be both?
At this point, it would be under human resources with just input from Coy's team, but we may come back in the future and readjust this to be the opposite.
Okay.
But I thought it was important to get it out there that is something that we're aware of as a organization, that there needs to be that connection.
Okay. Okay, if there isn't any other further changes, I think Bishop Carr, with those changes that you have written down, would you make a motion to amend?
Can I just ask?
Yes, go ahead. Wait, turn it back on.
Or was on to start with?
Yes.
I'm just clarifying, this is a work in progress still. It's not set in stone. This is something that's gonna be a working document for a while. All right, I'm good.
And when I'm making Bishop Carr's changes, I will also be moving some of that around to put the payroll manager directly across from the fiscal rather than the line being, I just didn't have time today, so.
Okay.
So I'd like to make a motion that we approve amend the motion to include the changes as discussed.
And second that.
Michael seconds. All right. Roll call.
Kate,
Yes.
Troy,
Yes.
Deb,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Jamie,
Yes.
and Michael.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
All right, on to J. I need a motion in a second. Deb,
I'll second.
Jamie, discussion.
I wanted to set this aside because this position is not a group. Then the 8% is determined by who? I think I know, but I just for clarity.
So the 8% was determined by what each group got. So when we took the in-house counsel is not a direct part of the district direction leaders because it doesn't answer just directly to the superintendent, but also answers to the board.
Okay.
So it had to be a separate group, a separate area listed because it's not in the same as that, although if you open them both up, they say the same thing.
Okay.
So
So I guess my point is, so then there's no negotiations like the other groups. So then
Correct.
how is it determined next year what this position gets as far as a raise?
So we took discussion to. I thought we took it to the, I thought we took, it- I thought we talked about it in executive session. So in executive session, that might have been the evening you were gone.
Okay,
So you participated via Zoom, but couldn't participate during executive session.
okay.
So I think that's the clarity is that this, what we offer, the different
Groups.
the different groups that are not aligned with a bargaining unit.
Okay.
So they don't have a,
That includes directors.
that
Each one
includes
of them can
directors.
come.
Okay,
Yep.
Well, not in this case, but typically the superintendent, the assistant superintendent, the
Okay.
chief.
yes.
So we discussed in
Okay.
executive session and that's where we landed. So I apologize for not
No,
updating
no
you on
problem.
that.
Thank you for that clarity. And I just wanted the opportunity to say on the record how I am so happy for this position. I'm happy for the position. I'm happy for the person in the position if she's listening. It's just, I mean, I will, no matter how long I serve on this board, I will be proud that I supported this particular position and especially the person in the position. So thank you.
All right, we have a motion, a second. Roll call?
Can I get one more quick
Oh, yes,
clarification?
go
Sorry.
ahead. Sorry.
I agree, by the way. That's not what I was gonna say, but now that you brought it up, yeah. Been paid for itself already.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, essentially, since she's one, well, this
Position.
this position is one person, they negotiate on their own, essentially. We've kind of used the other groups as a starting point, but then at the end of the day, this position is its own negotiating group.
Go ahead, Mr. Sassy.
So I think just to add some historical context to this as well in my time with the district. So obviously the members of that upper administration group, now called DDL, formerly SLT, they are not covered under any type of union agreement. Generally, the conversation has been that we would consult with the board on what that could look like. Obviously in conjunction with what's happening with the rest of the groups, in conjunction with what's happening with those positions in particular, and then come to some type of in common understanding and a common approach to those folks to go out and say, hey, here's where we think we're at. They don't bargain individually. However, they are really not under any type of unified agreement. So obviously the council position in particular is even a little different than that in the sense that it's sitting out on its own. And so I think it's for the individual contract of that person, but obviously it's going to look a little different every year. And I think that would be something we would discuss, ultimately bring to the board and say, hey, here's our thoughts, here's our recommendation. Here's what's happening with the other groups and here's what we think about this.
Right.
And obviously you all give your input and then we move from there. That makes sense?
Yeah, so kind of in between.
Yeah, kind of quasi, which is weird.
Yeah, like not on your own, but also on your own.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay,
That's all.
roll call, please.
Kate,
Yes.
Troy,
Yes.
Deb,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Jamie,
Yes.
and Michael.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Okay, on to L. I need a motion in a second.
So moved. So I can have it.
Troy and Jamie. We don't have to have a discussion.
I just had to pull it to recuse
Okay.
myself.
All right, we will roll call. Yes.
I need to recuse myself because my partner is a teacher.
Yes.
Jim,
I think.
Yes. Sorry.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Jamie
Yes.
and Michael.
And I will recuse.
Motion
Okay.
passes 5-0.
On to AA. I need a motion in a second. Deb,
I'll second.
Troy,
I actually wanted to
discussion.
pull it because I wanted the public to hear, now that Coy has educated me on what this machine is, I think the public should hear about this. That, you know, we talked about one of our major responsibilities, obviously fiscal responsibility and doing stretching the district's dollars as much as possible. And so this turf tank is actually a machine. Is it as big as the desk? Or is it smaller?
No, probably half. Yeah.
Probably half the size of this desk, that is able to use basically an iPad to program and paint all the lines on the fields. So one person can program it and be there to make sure it doesn't make any errors and they stand in the corners. And so one person can control that, where currently man hours and how many fields we have to manage was costing upwards of $230,000, $240,000, $250,000 a year to our district. This guy is gonna be $16,000 and one person to manage it. So I just wanted the public here, like, you know, finances and fiscal responsibility is hard, but I appreciate our administration, our staff, our facilities people finding creative ways to save money, and this thing's gonna pay for itself in like a day. I personally want a demonstration and wanna go watch turf tank, but just wanted people to hear that like we are in every corner and every looking for ways to save money and put more money directly to our students, and this is a great way of doing that.
I had a question of process. Now, what department is this request coming from?
So technically from Buildings and Grounds.
Buildings
Bishop
and
Carr,
Grounds.
yes.
Okay, did I miss any presentation about the need for this system or presentation on what it was or?
No, sir. Essentially, it came through as a capital outlay request from Buildings and Grounds. You're seeing it because of the lease aspect of it. So what we are actually doing is entering into a lease for this machine, $16,000 a year. Actually, technically $15,000 for the next 4 years, 16 for the first year. And so lease purchase agreements are always approved by the board, period. So you did not miss anything.
All right, so I think for my brain, it would have been better for the need and the presentation about what it was, the actual cost. Jamie did her background work by actually calling you. I had to go on last night and look at it on YouTube to find out what it is. And I'm a gadget person, so you know, I'm all about new things, but it would have been nice before seeing it on here to be presented with, here's what it is, here's why we need it, here's the costs, because I was gonna ask that would have been nice to justify 230 as an easy comparison, 230,000 versus, well, 90 in the 6 years of the lease. And so just, I guess it would have been some rubbing, you know, maybe bringing in the maintenance guy on crutches and saying, you know, his leg is hurt because he had to, you know, plow. Just, you know, some type of presentation would have been nice. My last question is there any importance in it being a 6-year lease versus a 3-year lease? Just because.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Bishop Carr. I think first of all noted, I am always looking for feedback in terms of how I can communicate with you all better and have you better prepared. So I will note that and we will make sure we have that from now on.
Thank you.
Just to give some very brief background, actually we had a discussion about this in Finance Committee as we were talking through preliminary budget. There's a couple aspects to it. I mean, obviously, John Lundgren, Buildings and Grounds Manager, and his crew did a great job of identifying a need, going out, researching. Gentleman came in, did a really thorough demonstration for them, painted a couple fields. And so that's how the conversation started. I think that obviously it makes sense from that angle. It makes sense just on its face. However, what we've talked about a lot on the support side, service side of our business is the idea that hiring is not getting any easier. It's going to continue to get more and more difficult. And so when we can, And when it makes sense, we are always trying to find ways to automate work. And in this situation, as Jamie said, John did a bunch of research, figured out that over several years, that function of painting these fields, and then some of the other pieces that are attached to that, like for example, not being able to keep grass on certain fields at a certain height because of how fast the paint comes off. And we just don't have the personnel necessary to be able to do that. It just is a massive savings. And so that from that aspect, we are continually trying to search out ways that how do we automate some of these things and be better. Another example is the carpet cleaners that we bought that look like a jet. You know, their wings are folded up and then they drive it in a room and they fold the wings down. They can do 3 times the amount of work that they were doing with half the staff. And so, you know, a lot of those types of things. I'm sorry, I forgot your second question. Now I talked myself out of it. Okay. Yeah, lease. Okay. Yes, sir. So, you know, the standard lease for this equipment is 6 years. I don't know that they offer a lower option than that. I think that we're going to see great results with this. So the other thing that the team did is they were evaluating this was make lots of calls. You know, they give you a reference list, and so they called several school districts and said, what's your experience with this, Ben? It just got great feedback. And so I think we're safe. We do have obviously out routes from the lease if necessary, but pretty standard for the most part, Bishop Carr.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Kate,
Yes.
Troy,
Yes.
Deb,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Jamie,
Yes.
Michael.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Okay, on to CC Addendum Human Resources. I need a motion and a second. Deb,
Second.
Michael. This can be approved, but it was requested that the Corral Drive principal, Mr. Foley's name be taken off for right now. So with that, I need a roll call.
Kate,
Yes.
Troy,
Yes.
Deb,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Jamie,
Yes.
and Michael.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
All right, on to items for board information. We have the 23-24 preliminary budget from Mr. Sassy.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Bobby, I went ahead and took over the screen. Thank you, Madam President. So this evening, I'll be presenting the fiscal year 2024 preliminary budget. Of course, as you're all aware, South Dakota codified law requires that a prelim budget is approved by the Board of Education at the end of May. The district then technically has until October 1st to pass a final. We will and have traditionally and will continue to bring that final budget to the annual meeting included under old business so that we have that budget approved as the new board comes in. Very quick summary of the format of this presentation. I'm going to go through some comparison data for you. We're going to look at some summary budget information. We're going to review revenue and expenditure highlights of the major funds, general fund, capital outlay, and special education. We're going to look at some reserve projections in the general fund and capital outlay, and then I'll turn it over to the board for questions and conversation. So I'm going to move pretty quick. As always, I don't want to glaze anybody too badly tonight. So I'm really excited to present this. I feel really good about this budget. So please, if you have questions, feel free to stop me and ask. Okay, so these first few slides, board, are really baseline comparison data. I presented this to the board for several years. I think it really helps the board to have an idea of what the district looks like at a big picture level at some of these major comparison points. This first slide is highlighting the district's historical property valuation. Property tax makes up a significant portion of the district's revenue, and ultimately that tax revenue is driven off of what you see in front of you, the district's total property valuation. So the blue line here represents the district's overall property assessment. And then the orange bars represent the percentage change from year to year. So as you can see, really over this past 7 to 8 year period from around 2014 to present, the district's total valuation growth has consistently ranged between 4 to 8% per year. As you can see, the 2022 assessment increased by 18%, taking the total valuation from 9 billion to just over 10.6 billion. So a massive year over year increase in terms of property tax. Obviously, in a lot of ways, that's great. It drives new revenue. It does some really good things for the district. In other very complicated ways that I promised the finance committee I won't dive too deeply into tonight, it does create some challenges in terms of the relationship with state aid as well. Yes, ma'am.
Yep.
Yeah.
So this 18%.
Mike.
The 18% represents the value where it's gone up.
Yes.
Does this include tax appeals, the appeals that are happening? I mean, will that be on here, or because the county just is doing theirs?
Yeah, so typically what happens, Mrs. Baker, is as those are going through the process of appeal, we will get an updated or an amended property valuation. I would tell you, in my time with the district, I have not seen that greatly impact the total valuation. Of course, under a situation like this, where it's a much more aggressive increase,
Well, the only
that could
reason I'm
change.
wondering is because when we were at, we sit in on the city one when people were coming in to appeal.
Yeah.
And there was not one person that came in that they did not reduce down to what they wanted. And that's
Sure.
what I'm kind of wondering what's gonna happen when this stuff gets to the county.
If I may, yeah, it goes from the city, that's not the end result, and then it goes back
Right.
to the
Right.
county
Right.
for them to determine. I would imagine that most of those would change, but again, like you were saying, it wasn't every single
Sure.
person in the community, so I mean, it was a
Right.
larger amount, but not.
I would say, I think we have to really think about the scope of what we're talking. We're talking about $10.6 billion of property valuation. So even if there was 500 people that came out and got their assessments changed, it's really going to be a drop in a really, really massive bucket. So I would not anticipate, unless there's something I'm missing, that would make a big difference in that. But you make a great point. I mean, you're right. It is a concern. And again, obviously, there are some aspects of it that are great for our district, and there are other aspects of it that make things a little complicated too. So, but overall, of course, it is driving new revenue into the district through property tax and each of the major funds. This next slide is highlighting some enrollment trend information. Obviously, enrollment, another very important factor for several district sources of revenue, primarily state aid. So this chart shows a couple different pictures of enrollment. The blue line here is the funding count from the state aid fall enrollment count that takes place in September of each year. So in the current year, 2022, the most recent count, that actual count was 12,665. The important thing to remember is that enrollment is never a static figure. It's literally changing on a daily basis for our district. So often the figure that's captured on the state aid fall enrollment count can look very different from what the district's actual enrollment is throughout the year. Typically, that count increases after September and throughout the remainder of the year. So this orange line is representing the district's high point enrollment for that given year. Now, the issue here is if that enrollment high point is after the September state aid fall enrollment count date, none of those students are counted towards state aid funding. So the district incurs costs to educate those students that it does not receive any funding for. And that's really the major point that we're trying to show here in this graph. As you recall from our legislative meetings, that was an item that we talked about quite a bit with our legislative representatives here locally, was the idea of how we do a better job as a state of capturing that enrollment information and reflecting a more accurate picture of enrollment. Because as you can see, funding count was 12,665. The high student count for the year was 12,911. So we're leaving several hundreds of students on the table that aren't being counted. And we're talking about millions of dollars of revenue, and this is not something exclusive to Rapid City. This would impact a lot of different districts around the state. So again, something that we'll continue to talk to our local folks about and try to effectuate a change. So we've discussed this several times. We've seen that after this major enrollment decline here from 2019 to 2020, we had a slight bounce back. And then really have leveled off. And understanding how important enrollment is for our revenue sources, I always like to mention, and I think it's important to mention, that all of our budget estimates are based upon flat state aid enrollment. So we took essentially last year's numbers and took them as a flat enrollment count. Obviously, we hope for an enrollment rebound. We feel at some point, given some of the indicators we see around our community, that we are going to see an enrollment rebound, but we felt it best to be conservative and use a flat enrollment figure. Obviously, where that number actually lands in the fall will be very, very important for the district from several different perspectives. So this is a really busy slide. Ultimately, what it's looking at is the allocation from the state aid formula, which is here in this blue bar, in comparison to overall general fund revenues, which is depicted by this orange bar. And then ultimately comparing that to overall general fund expenditures per student. And ultimately what this chart shows is that in more recent years, as costs increased and the state aid formula fell behind, the total expenditures per student, this gray bar, began to outpace revenue, and thus a deficit began. You can see that trend has become more prominent, especially in the last 4 to 5 years. I think that the important part of what this graph conveys is that the proportion of state aid revenue to overall general fund revenue has continued to fall behind, lag and fall behind. And we've talked about that concept several different times. And this is flashing back to the valuation slide. One of the results of having that really rapid valuation increase without having the need increase in state aid is that we see the amount of state aid falling as total proportion of general fund revenue in comparison to all other general fund revenue sources. So that's really the major point of that slide. I think we need to continue to monitor that situation. Again, that's something we need to continue to be in the ear of legislators about and trying to effectuate change to the state aid formula, some type of hold harmless around property valuation increase so that districts like ours are not seeing that lopsided trend continue over years like we are. Okay, highlighting capital outlay flexibility usage over the years. Obviously, you can see this number has bounced around a lot over the past decade, from a high of 6.25 million here in 2022, down to a couple of years with zero usage. Obviously, we are very, very happy about the results that we've seen over the last couple of years. This has been one of the major focuses in terms of trying to revamp the district's budget, trying to move away from the dependence on capital outlay flexibility. So you can see our projection as we move into fiscal year 2024 is that capital outlay flexibility will be all the way down to $586,000. So really a major change in terms of what we're seeing in capital outlay flexibility usage.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, go ahead. How? So it's great that we went from 5.5 million or whatever down to 600,000, but where did that 5 million go? What was shifted around there?
Sure. So a couple different things. I think one, and I'll talk more about this as we go through the slides. One is obviously we're seeing good revenue growth from the property tax side. That's driving up overall revenue. As you will see in a later slide, even with the 7% increase to the target teacher salary of the state aid formula, it essentially kept the district on a level state aid amount. So essentially was frozen from year to year, which it could be worse, right? If the state legislators had approved a lower number, the situation would look very different. But the fact that it stayed stable and it remained stable at least helped us boost our revenue as we saw new revenue coming in. On the other side, we've been able to, over the past 2 years, although we've driven significant increases into salary and benefits, we've really been able to essentially freeze the remainder of the budget and keep it stable, which has helped to, even though we're increasing, curb that overall cost and bring it down. And so what we're effectually doing is putting pressure on both sides of the scale. We are driving revenue while at the same time taking overall chunks of the budget and driving it back down and trying to get closer to a balanced budget. Obviously, the other factor in there is that there's a lot going on in the general fund. It's $110 million. So there's a lot of different factors that are happening. There are other sources of revenue that are changing. There are other components on the expenditure side that are changing. And so we've essentially tried to really drive those two mechanisms, really taking advantage of every bit of new revenue that we're getting, while at the same time trying to apply pressure on the expenditure side, even though we're increasing salaries. So, and there's some more specific pieces of that as you walk through the funds too. Yeah, absolutely. So this is a look at the expenditure budget summary in fiscal year 24 versus fiscal year 23. So the yellow column here is the latest revised budget from the current fiscal year. Green column is the preliminary proposed expenditure numbers. Then we have a total dollar increase and a percentage increase. So as you can see, just quickly working through that, general fund expenditure is increasing about 5%. Capital outlay with a really minor increase of 1%. SPED shows the largest increase of the major funds at 7%. Food service actually showing a decrease of about 18%. I'll talk a little more about that later in the slides. Overall, district's expenditure budget increases about 6.3 million year over year, or about 3%. So again, we're pulling other costs down as we're increasing compensation and overall trying to really curb what the expenditure side of that looks like. So this is the budget summary for fiscal year 24, revenue versus expenditure. So on the revenue side, as we talked about, we're looking at about 109.1 million in the general fund versus $109.7 million of expenditures. This is where our $586,000 figure for capital outlay flexibility comes in. That, in this case, deficit as a reflection of total expenditures is about -1%. So again, we are dangerously close to balancing that general fund, which when we do that, I will buy everyone up here pizza and we can have a major celebration. Capital outlay right now, we're showing $82.5 million in revenue, $80.9 million of expenditure. So we're actually running about a $1.6 million surplus in the fund as of the preliminary budget, which is about 2%. SPED showing a 1% surplus for an overall surplus of 1.3 million, or about 1%. I think the asterisk that I need to add here is obviously this is the preliminary budget. There will be some changes between now in the final budget. I'll talk more about what I think those are and what I think they look like. But again, as we move into the year in a really healthy place overall. So this is just a quick summary of the information you just saw. Total budget, 245 million, increase of 6.4 million, or about 3% from the current fiscal year. I'd like to talk just very briefly, sorry about that, about a couple of the premises that we use in that as we are structuring the budget, we're having conversations at a board level, at an administration level, really the things that were top of mind. So again, all these estimates were based around a flat year-over-year enrollment. The major priority, what we heard loud and clear in our discussions from the board down, was addressing compensation. And at the same time doing that, while being mindful of the impact that that has to the other funds like capital outlay and to the other priorities of the district. Open issues. So there will be some adjustments from the preliminary to the final. Primarily will be rolling the actual compensation plan into the budget. So you will recall last year we talked about the idea that what we did in terms of setting the allocations for negotiations was look at increasing the overall personnel and salary plan of the district. And so that's what we've taken and pushed forward into this budget. What HR will be working on from now until the final is essentially going through exactly what the personnel roster is going to look like and applying that increase and then pushing that to us so that we can then pull it into the final budget. That was the strategy that we used last year. We have come very, very close to where we had predicted. We're about 98% on schedule for salary and benefit expenditures up to this year. So it worked really, really well. It'll be interesting to compare this year and see what that looks like in the final budget as compared to this. But I would expect the numbers will be very, very close, maybe even a little bit favorable in terms of overall expenditures. Okay, moving into some of the fund highlights. General fund, obviously being the major operating fund of the district. Total revenue, $109.7 million, about a 4.12% overall increase in revenue. Major driver of that was state aid. Excuse me, that is not the major driver. Major driver of that is property tax at $47.5 million. Increase of 5.5 million or 13%. So again, flashing back to our valuation slide, that really aggressive valuation is really driving a lot of new revenue into the general fund. State aid, as we talked about a little earlier, coming in at just over 41 million, actually a very, very minor decrease of about 305,000 from the current year, or about 0.74%. Again, thank goodness for the 7% increase to state aid. That really helped to at least keep that amount stable. And again, that figure is based upon the flat state aid fall enrollment estimate of 12,650. Some of the other notes, as we discussed, the deficit down to 585,000, down about 4.9 million from the current year budget. So I know I kind of generalized some of those responses, but we've really driven the strategy over the last 2 years of trying to push everything into compensation, pull the other expenditures down, or at least keep them flat, as we knew that we were going to see, or we hoped that we were going to see some increases on the major revenue sources. And so that's what's really given us the ability to take those mechanisms and start to turn that and drive towards a balanced budget. On the expenditure side, again, the expenditure is 109.7 million, increase of about 4.7 million, or about 5% from the revised current year budget, driven completely by salary and benefit increases. Total salaries increased about 4.6 million, or about 7%. And then total benefits are increasing 875,000, or about 5%. Every other spending category either remained flat or had a very minimal increase. Again, which is a major part of that strategy. Here's what the expense breakdown looks like from a graphical perspective. So the blue chunk being salaries, the orange chunk being benefits. Again, as the major operating account, it looks like what you would expect it to look like. These two pieces make up about 85% of the overall general fund budget. So 85% of the total expenditures are being driven into salary and benefits. Purchase services making up about 12.5 million, supplies about 5.4, property and liability insurance 1.3, and then a very, very small contingency there of about 250,000. So general fund summary, again, property tax revenue increasing helps to increase that overall revenue picture. State aid was essentially frozen, even with the 7% increase to the target teacher compensation. Major increase in salaries and benefits, but again, able to hold those costs down by holding the remainder of the budget static. Major decrease in the deficit and the flexibility transfer, which is really positive. But enrollment will be crucial. Enrollment will really be, as it has been over the last several years, the indicator that we'll be watching, because it'll have a major impact on how this budget looks and performs in the next year. Any thoughts or questions on general fund before I move on to capital outlay? Okay. Capital outlay on the revenue side, total revenue projected at 82.5 million, increase of about 1.5%. ESSER sources, of course, are blurring that picture. That makes up about 54.1 million of that total revenue. Approximately 45% as of the last payout, 45% into the South Middle School project. So we're approaching the 50% mark. So those ESSER funds will now really begin to decrease at a much more rapid rate, because we're fully into the construction. The pay apps are becoming larger and larger, so that will begin to decrease more quickly. Property tax makes up about 98% of total regular capital outlay revenue. So again, if we removed some of these one-time funding sources, it would make up 98% of the regular revenue at about 28.2 million, which is an increase of 1.2 million or 4.4%. There's a really interesting note I want to make here, and this is probably too far down the rabbit hole, but I do think it's worth noting regarding property valuation growth in its relation to capital outlay. So again, if we flash back to the general fund, we saw property tax revenue increasing by 13%. As we look at capital outlay, we're only seeing property tax increase by 4.4%, just over $1 million. That doesn't make sense, right? So this is a really interesting note. A few years ago, if you recall, the capital outlay formula changed from a pure levy formula, so a levy on the total property valuation of the district, to a formula in which the year-over-year maximum request is driven by multiplying a district's current year max times a growth factor plus 3% calculation. So essentially, when the state made that change, they came up with, okay, here's what we believe your max levy is. And then every year you can grow that levy by 3% plus the growth indicator of your value, or excuse me, of your school district. Although the district's property valuation increased by 18% this year, the growth factor that the county submits that to the state, was only 1.9%. The growth factor is defined as any new construction, both commercial and residential, that has occurred in the last year within the district's boundaries. So I'm not an expert. I'm not saying this is necessarily what happened, but this suggests that the major growth in valuation was driven by valuation increases to existing property and not necessarily new growth. This does have a major impact on capital outlay, because if growth is, say, 7%, capital outlay revenue will increase at a much more rapid pace than it is under these current conditions. So again, not to rabbit hole our conversation, but I think it is an interesting point that does have a major impact on overall capital outlay revenue. In any case, we do see a reasonable increase of about 4.5% in the ongoing capital outlay revenue. So not all bad news, but really interesting to point out the differences there between capital outlay and the general fund and special ed and how that's funded. Okay, on the expenditure side, total expenditures about 81 million. That's a decrease of 3.9 million. That's really driven by changes in ESSER and decrease in the flexibility transfer to the general fund. Again, just to point out, about $54 million of overall capital outlay expenditures are dedicated to the South Middle School project. So really not a lot to note on the expenditure side. Looks like a pretty common year. Graphical breakdown of capital outlay. This big gray area is what we call capital acquisitions at about $50.5 million. The vast majority of that is dedicated to the South Middle School project. Supplies and large equipment making up about 12.6 million. Purchase services, which is a lot of our facility construction projects are in that category, about 8.7 million. Debt service at about 7.1 million. Fiscal year 24 and fiscal year 25 will be the high point years for the district's debt service. It gets up into 7.1 million in fiscal year 24, about 7.25 million in fiscal year 25, and then throughout the next 5 years begins to gradually decline, and then ultimately by fiscal year 30 is completely paid off, and the district is debt free essentially. So that rounds out the major spending categories in capital outlay. So quick summary, again, major revenue source of property tax continue to show strong increase, not as strong as some of the other funds given the funding situation. Community continues to grow, which benefits district revenue. Overall, capital outlay is in a really strong position. It carries a good fund balance. We do need to consider that approximately $5 million of cash is pledged to the SMS construction project. Also, I didn't point this out in the notes, but we are carrying about $15 million in cash that was generated through the capital outlay certificate that we issued also for South Middle. So the cash balance is a little deceiving, but even removing those two sources, it's in a really good spot. So ultimately, the decline in general fund flexibility is really a major benefit. I think when we think about the idea of reducing that from 5 to 6 million down to where it's at currently, and the ability to push those resources back into capital outlay and for them to be dedicated to other district needs, major facility needs, preventative maintenance, that's a big deal. I mean, you think about that over a 10 or 20 year period, and now you're getting 50 and $100 million pushed back into capital outlay for those uses. So not to put too sharp of a point on it, but I think it's a really, really big deal for the district. Whoops. Okay, very quickly covering SPED, total revenue about 28.2 million. Property tax making up about 17.4 million of that. Very similar to the general fund, we see an increase of $2 million in property tax, or about 13%. State aid making up about 6.6 million of total revenue. On the expenditure side, about 27.9 million. So you can see we have a small surplus as of now. Total expenditures increasing about 1.8 million, or 7%. Similar to the general fund, this increase is entirely in salaries and benefits. All other categories remain flat or decreased. Graphical breakdown, again, salaries in the blue, benefits in the orange. This makes up about 92% of overall SPED expenditures. So to an even greater degree than the general fund, vast majority of those expenditures are in salary and benefits. Quick summary, general fund property tax revenue and state aid increase are leading to a nice overall revenue increase for the fund. The major expenditure increase was driven by salary and benefits. I would say this fund currently shows a surplus. However, it has the most proposed changes that need to be cleaned up between now in the final budget. And so I would expect that this fund will show the most changes of any of the funds as we move into the final budget. Just to highlight a couple of the other funds, student nutrition, as we talked about, is seeing a $1.2 million, about an 18% expenditure decrease. Excuse me. Crystal Leichner, student nutrition manager, has done a really great job of taking a very, very hard look at her program, understanding where she can decrease expenditures. I believe a little later in the summer, we are planning on having her come in for one of the study sessions and give you an overview of her program. That program is in a really tough spot. I mean, student nutrition has always had a difficult and bit of an uphill battle, but there's some things that have changed over the past several years that have made that situation more difficult. And so Krista has done a really nice job of evaluating her program. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. Finding some areas that she can capitalize on. Excuse me, I never cough. This is the one time. Excuse me. So she'll talk more about that, but overall, she's doing some very good things with that program. Health insurance fund, we've not increased that. Excuse me, not finalized what that premium increase will look like. I have included contingency funds in each of the major funds to offset what we think that increase is going to look like. So that's embedded in there. Lastly, just very quickly going through some reserve balance projections. So general fund, as we've talked about several times, the district has laid out over the past several years a 12% reserve balance requirement, 12% of total expenditures. So in fiscal year 24, that would be about 13.1 million. And as you can see, our projection is that we're going to come in right around that. So we will be in a good position in terms of general fund reserve. On the capital outlay side, capital outlay is a very different monster than the general fund. It's a project-based budget, so it looks very different in terms of what we set aside for a cash balance reserve. Has, I would say, more to do with the future goals of the district, what the district wants to do with those funds. Over the past several years, we have set that reserve target at 15 million, which is about 50% of overall expenditures. As you can see, we're going to exceed that. We'll be about $45 million. But again, I need to point out, there's about 20 million of that is specifically earmarked for the South Middle School project. So true reserve will be more like 30 million. Even so, in a really good position as we move into next year. In summary, through really a massive amount of information at you, I think to highlight a few things, we talked about last year the idea that budget was sort of a turning point. We were able to start some of those mechanisms that we talked about. We were able to start turning this giant beast of a district that we have. I shared with the finance committee in our review of this information. I really think of this budget process as sort of a rebuilding process. We're trying to rebuild this structure financially. We're trying to put it on a more secure foundation as we move into the future. And so this is the second year in a row that I think we continue to lay that really strong foundation. And really the ability for the district to continue to build on in a way that's meaningful, effective, and can truly change the district as we move into the future. As we talked about, the two major focus areas over the past 2 years have been, one, increasing compensation. We've increased overall district compensation over the last 2 years by 15%. That's nearly $12 million of additional compensation to district employees over the last 2 years. And secondly, continuing to decrease the general fund deficit and the reliance on capital outlay flexibility. And as you saw in the slides earlier, we've reduced that from a high of 6.25 million in 2022 to 586,000 moving into the next budget year. So I'm really pleased with the progress. I think it's again a really, really strong foundation that we're sitting in this, that we're building through this process. Really excited and look forward to the future. So Madam Chair, with that, I will turn it back over to the board for any questions or discussion.
I'm looking at the hands. I'm not seeing any hands. Nope.
Yeah.
Awesome job. Thank you.
Well, it's one of two things, either really good or really bad. So
Yeah,
I'm going to take it as good. Thank you all.
yeah, thanks. Okay. B, information item. Is that you, Mrs. Wagner?
It
The two?
is.
Okay.
It is. There's two here. Knollwood is applying for a Dollar General Literacy Foundation grant. It is for $4,000. The announcements will be made August 17th of 2023. It is for, first of all, it's super important that it will only be used to purchase district approved items. And it will be for implementing new or expanding existing literacy programs, purchasing new technology or equipment to support literacy initiatives, or purchasing books, materials, or software for literacy programs, only district approved ones.
What was
So-
the total amount?
$4,000. So that's a lot of things that it could be spent on.
And they're
And
applying for this?
they're
or
applying for this grant from the
Okay.
Dollar General Literacy Foundation.
Okay.
So, we bring those forward to you so that you know what we're doing. So we're applying for that one. The other one is a Robbinsdale Adopt a Classroom. They have received, we already approved their application, but they have received a donation from adoptaclassroom.org. It's a nonprofit that provides classroom funding to pre-K through 12th grade educators throughout the US. It was founded in 1998. It is one of the original crowdfunding websites. They offer the most flexible funding for educators so they can purchase supplies. They fund classrooms by collecting donors to teachers through the crowdfunding platform, grants and corporate sponsorships. It is also, once again, that funding is only used for district approved supplies or equipment. And that was the Robbinsdale.
Okay. Any
Um,
questions?
Any questions? Okay, and
We're on
then
to committee reports from any board members. Mrs. Clapham.
Super fast because quoted finance committee report, so definitely don't need to go there. But just that to follow up the Public School Foundation, the Teresa Johnson gift is actually already in action. And there will be 8 students who will benefit from that for their trip to Germany this summer already. So, you know, in just a couple weeks, we're already seeing that benefit our students.
Mr. Carr.
I wasn't able to attend the last facility report, but I did see that the board received the what do you call it? The notes, the minutes, thank you. The minutes of that meeting.
Okay, I don't see any other hands. All right. Items for board action. We have the 2023-2024 preliminary budget approval, which Mr. Sassy just went over. So I need a motion.
I will make a motion.
Deb
Second.
and Michael. And we still have Mr. Hanson on, so roll call, please.
Kate,
Yes.
Troy,
Yes.
Deb,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Jamie,
Yes.
and Michael.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
All righty, on to the superintendent report, Mrs. Swagert.
thank you, President Thomas. It's an exciting time of year. May is incredibly busy. Since our last board meeting, I have attended a meeting with the South Dakota Department of Education to help structure some of our restructuring, or reporting to them, a restructuring of Rapid City High School. And it's important that we get on the same page with them. So that was a very important meeting, large group superintendents meeting. I think they like to tease me because most of them are getting out of school this Friday. And so although some of them had mini snow days and they're going a little bit later, but next year we'll be out at the same time. So it'll all be good. I did want to celebrate the fact that we did offer employees buildings in the school buildings in the district to have teachers donate $5 and wear jeans for a week. And we took that money and we donated it to what's going to be the Honoring the Children Wachipi or powwow that is going to happen. And that I just want to congratulate the PAC. They have done some incredibly hard work in organizing that Honoring the Children Wachipi that will be happening at the end of school. And our staff helped support that for over $2,000. So that was really phenomenal. I met with the new lead or CEO of the Boy Scouts of the Black Hills. And I would think that we're going to have some partnership opportunities with them moving forward. They do such great work with the Eagle Scouts program. As Mrs. Clapham mentioned, the Teresa Johnson The official kickoff of that was held at Stevens High School. We recognized that an individual from Rapid City area left an endowment of over $400,000 to Stevens High School, mainly Stevens High School, Science Department, Music Department, and Foreign Language Department, and $25,000 to West Middle School for their music department. And it's super exciting. That is a huge endowment, and the care of that money is being done by Rapid City Public School Foundation, but the intent is for it to be a continuing fund that will support those departments for hopefully maybe perpetuity forever. That's kind of the idea. They're going to try to use the interests off that money to fund things moving forward. And it's a really incredible thing. And I want us to continue to recognize that a former graduate of Rapid City area schools did that for our community. Stephen seems to be really excited about inviting me over there. So I've also attended senior class presentations for the English class. Imagine my surprise and joy when I was walking out and encountered 3 board members that were there for a different class's presentations. So they're doing a nice job having opportunities for people to come in and interact with the students. Policy committee is working hard. We didn't talk about it, but I did want to mention that we're working hard still on the library policy. There's a couple other policies on attendance that will be coming forward as well to the policy committee that we need to address moving into next school year. I attended a virtual meeting in Pierre last Friday. My husband got lost on the way home from Pierre. I just think I need to point that out. Because he'll love that. But we had been in Sioux Falls the night before and he entertained himself for 4 hours while I went to a virtual school meeting. That is important work that's happening. It's a conversation about, will the state fund districts to pay for all of the virtual school options for our students? And there was a lot of conversation because there does seem to be a little bit, it came forward with a House bill that did not move forward with Senator Odenbach out of the Spearfish area. And there seems to be some confusion about, does the district pay for the courses for those students, or does the Department of Education pay? And so if it's coming out of the district, how are we getting those funds? And there's also a lot of district responsibilities with virtual education, including who's taking the attendance, who's communicating with the parents, who's watching student progress, who's proctoring the tests. And we need to be very careful as we do that work that we are making sure that it is not creating a bigger charge or cost than we're getting from the state. So that work is continuing. I will go back for the 3rd meeting on that June 8th in Pierre. I will not get lost because I go to Vivian. I don't try to come back through Phillip. I know the way. Stevens High School also had me over yesterday for the fine arts signing. So I have been to Stevens High School, I think 4 or 5 times in the last 2 weeks. So I challenge all the other schools to invite me, because if they invite me, I try to go. Today, some major work was done with our principals. So we used quite a bit of, we used a significant portion of our Title IIA professional development funds to do some principal leadership work this year, and principals met with ICLE today to do some work on principal leadership. That is hard work, and I feel like we talk a lot about trying to take off work from the plates of teachers, and we recognize that their plates are very full, but I would say that principal plates are very full as well, and we need to be aware and cognizant of what we're putting on their plates, but they worked really hard. We also had them come to a meeting today with our strategic planner. Typically, those things wouldn't happen on the same day, but that's the way the calendar fell. So here on Studer's, Representative Casey was here today, and we walked the principals through on the strategic plan. And then we started talking about how the scorecards or how that will be implemented at the building level moving forward after the strategic plan is implemented. So that's great work that we're getting started on. Before our next meeting, as I said, it's May. So before our next meeting, we will have graduation. We will have the last day of school. We will have the honoring ceremony. We will have graduation for Central, graduation for Stevens, graduation from Rapid City High School, the completion ceremony for GED. All of those things have a ton of work that goes into that. They are all outside the school day. So it is things that the board attends. It is I attend, district leaders attend, but each building that puts those on, that's a significant amount of work in those buildings to make that happen. And I want to recognize that because we won't meet until after that has occurred. I know all of you have received invitations, and I know that you make an effort to make those things fit into your schedule, and I want to thank you for that. And then it will be June 2nd and students will be released, and June 5th, teachers will wrap up, and I will see you June 6th. Thank you.
Any questions for her? You do? Go ahead, Mr. Carr.
Just for clarity, on the status change of Rapid City High School, you said you attended a meeting with the?
I attended a meeting with the state as we've discussed earlier this year, is that Rapid City High School's success rate and the situation of what we have in that program right now as a school is that we have created a program that is constantly in school improvement. We are not doing well on our state testing. In the 21-22 school year, we had less than 1% of the students at Rapid City High School show proficiency in math. And the number in literacy, reading, language arts was also low. So we are absorbing those students. They can still attend Rapid City High School, but we're absorbing those school students back into Central and Stevens High School as their home schools. And we are creating a program that is kind of going back to the roots of what the alternative programs were in Rapid City. And we're going to focus on meeting the students where their level of need is for credit recovery and student success. And in order to do that, we had to dissolve Rapid City High School as a school entity that is a diploma granting entity.
That's my question. So they approved that?
They approved that. Okay. So we were meeting with the state about how, because things have changed, because the state doesn't make things easy for us. So in the past, when we had all the different academy programs, each academy was an entity. Now you can't be an entity unless you're a school. So we had to create calendars we had to kind of create a sub-school under Central and Stevens to enroll those students in and give Rapid City High School access to that. So it was a complicated conversation, but we are all on the same page now. So we are good to go. And then also the middle school behavior program will be located in that building. And that is going to be some great work that's going to help relieve some behavior issues at our middle schools. And we're going to use that really as a sounding ground or an ability for us to really be prepared to expand that to high school and elementary the following year. So go fast to go slow. That's what we're doing, and being able to address those moving forward. Although we do have plans in place to help behavior at the elementary this fall as well, because we recognize that as a huge concern for our educators.
Do you mean go slow?
Go slow to go fast, go fast to go slow to go fast. Yes. Okay. Sorry, long day.
When will the official name change be? When will that be official? Right.
So July 1st, when the fiscal year starts for the school districts across the state of South Dakota, Rapid City High School will become Rapid City Alternative Center, Alternative Education Center, or something like that. And then there'll be a Eagles Path program, which will be for high school students. and a middle school bridges program, which will be for middle school students who are facing some behavior challenges in their home middle schools. And then next year, we hope to add a high school bridges program and an elementary bridges program. Then the 24-25 school year. Thank you.
All right, we are on to other. Do any board members have an other? Mrs. Clapham.
I will try to be succinct. Since I the study session, I just, it's the end of the school year. So I guess, kind of technically the end of my first school year as a board member. And I just wanted to, at the end of the year, say thank you to every staff, whether that's IT, whether that's custodians, whether that's teachers. I think Kevin Brigcrow said it well, for the people who I know what you do and the people that I have no idea what you do, but school would not function without you. And to thank parents, families who volunteer, who bring snacks, who get their kids on the bus, who drive their kids to school when they miss the bus. All those people is what it takes to make this majorly large machine work. And the students who it's been phenomenal to watch achieve academically and athletics, volunteering in the arts. And that this is a challenging work, but it's a privilege and an honor to be in this seat in this capacity. And I really can't believe it's already been one school year, but that I'm appreciative of everybody who's helped me grow in this position, and that I look forward to what we can do to be better and grow stronger next year.
Mr. Brooklyn.
Last week I said, thank you for all the volunteers, and then we got a whole bunch of volunteers again this week. So I figured I better shout it out again. It's so great to see that our community is coming through and helping us out with these volunteer positions. So hopefully next time I also see a full page full of names. Thank you.
And I guess I would just give another shout out to the student representatives and for the wonderful, excellent job that they did in representing their schools this year. All right. Okay, I need a motion and a second to go into executive session for SDCL 1-25-2.1. Deb?
Second.
Michael? And we do have no further action afterwards. And we need a roll call on that.
Kate,
Yes.
Troy,
Yes.
Deb, Jim,
Yes.
Jamie,
Yes.
and Michael.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.